Welcome back to the channel. It's been a little bit since the last video, and this is another one of the prediction videos because I want to get them done and cranked out for you before the season starts, obviously. And speaking of the season starting, it's a week away. Well, actually, this time next week, the game will be done. Detroit Lions versus Kansas City will be done. The first game of the season, which is so exciting. Fantasy football season, if you're into that as well, it's well underway. I've got a couple of leagues going, but that's beside the point. Today we are talking about the AFC North. That means the Steelers, the Ravens, the Bengals, and of course the Browns. What's going to transpire this year in this division? And just right off the bat, this division looks unbelievable. I think it's the one division that genuinely there is a path for every single one of these teams to win this division. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily equal for each team. There's definitely favourites for me out of this AFC North to win the division. I think every one of these teams could very well pave a path throughout the season to win this division. It's that competitive, so I'm very excited to see what happens. But without further ado, let's just get into it. And so at the fourth spot, finishing last in this division, I can't go past the Browns. And I did just mention that every one of these teams could genuinely find a way to win and finish on top of this division. And the Browns, I do think there is a way. There's a world in which Deshaun Watson just blows the doors off the roof. Is that even a saying? That can't be a saying. There's a world in which Deshaun Watson just absolutely kills it. He's back to his best a couple years ago before the touchy subject that we won't go into because there's no need. Anyway, Deshaun Watson could kill it, and that's an important factor because obviously quarterback being the most important position, but that's the thing. Me personally, I can't see him returning to his best. Obviously last season when he was able to come back after that suspension, he didn't look great. Having a preseason, having a whole season now to run into could be perfect for him, and it could work out brilliantly for the Browns, but I just don't see him returning to that best. In terms of total yards, this is a player that has been over 5,000 across a season, but with the Cleveland Browns, I just don't see it happening. And while I think it will be competitive, this division, because these teams are really looking good, especially the ones that we're about to talk about, I just don't see them finishing higher than last in this division. And in terms of the key players, we've already obviously talked about the key player in Deshaun Watson, not just because he's the quarterback, but there's obviously a lot of talk around him, and for good reason, both on and off the field, but we're talking specifically on the field now. The other ones that I want to mention, Elijah Moore is a great addition. I think he'll really unlock his potential. I think he'll be a great 2 to Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is another one, this sort of offense needs to explode and really gel for a Cleveland Browns run to happen. That's just not my prediction, but Elijah Moore, I'm really sort of intrigued to see how he goes, because obviously his time in New York was pretty bad in terms of the relationship there. It didn't work out. He didn't like Zach Wilson, nor did pretty much anyone else except for a few mums. But he's here in Cleveland now, and I think he can be a brilliant 2 behind Amari Cooper. The other one, of course, is Myles Garrett. He could be an absolute game wrecker and another sort of avenue to lead this defense. He could be another way to a Browns very, very good season into the playoffs. But I think one man, it's very hard. As good as Myles Garrett is, even if he were to have a sort of record-breaking sack season, it's just hard to see this whole team in the Cleveland Browns doing much better than my prediction of 4th, and that gets us to the record. What do I think they'll finish with? Wins, losses. In the past, I've been pretty thereabouts with them. I'm not really fussed with the wins, losses category. I'd rather just rank them in terms of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but I do give it anyway. And for the Browns, I'm going to give them 6 wins. I do think they'll be. It's hard to say because I think they'll be slightly better than that wins category. 6 wins doesn't really sound right, but just due to the strength of this division in the AFC North and just the AFC as a whole, I just see it being very difficult for the Cleveland Browns having a successful season. So 6 wins is what I've got them at. Now this is where the intriguing part of this division begins. I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers finishing 3rd. And I'm really finding it hard to do that because these three teams, the Steelers and who we're going to talk about obviously soon, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Ravens. These three teams, I think any one of them could win it in terms of being a relatively equal chance. The Cleveland Browns, it's a very sort of niche pathway that I think they have to victory here, but the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Bengals, I think are very, very even in terms of who wins this division. And having the Steelers third, as I said, it's a bit difficult for me to put them here because I rate them very highly going into the season. And for one big reason in particular, Mike Tomlin, still there. They have not had a losing season under him. And this season, second year with Kenny Pickett under center, they look primed and ready to make a run. So third place, while it's third place in the division, I think the record, which we'll get to, may lend to them making the playoffs still. And obviously, if you've been tuning in to pre-season, they've had an unbelievable pre-season. And, you know, how much you want to read into that is up to you. And for me, obviously, I try and take it with a bit of grain of salt, but you can't deny the pre-season that they've had. Under Kenny Pickett, all his drives were basically flawless. He was nailing every throw, getting the touchdowns, getting off the field, and just relaxing for the rest of the games. And so I don't think you can necessarily ignore it. You don't want to read into it too much, but the Steelers, both offensively and defensively, I think they've been set, and even before this season, entering the season, TJ Watt is the main man. You want him fit the whole season. He is the key player because when he's on the field, the Steelers are a 10 times better team. But when you look at this offense, they're looking dynamic. They're looking like they're going to be a threat this season. With George Pickens, I think he emerges as that number one receiver on this team. I truly believe that because, you know, I love Deontay Johnson, great receiver, but George Pickens just has that size and that X-factor capability to take this team and this offense and himself to the next level. And then, of course, the quarterback as well. We've already mentioned Kenny Pickett. I think it takes another step or another two to be a solidified quarterback one in this league and a franchise quarterback for the Steelers for many years to come. And so why do I have them finishing third? Where is the drop-off? And I think it's not about them. It's about the other teams. The Ravens and the Bengals just being better and maybe in those close games the Steelers might drop a few because of the inexperience of the quarterback, of a couple of the receivers, of just various players. Obviously one of the most experienced head coaches in the league, but I think it would just be those factors of other teams being able to capitalize better than the Steelers across the season. And so the record that I am going to predict for them is a 9-8 record. Basically, I think that will be enough to maybe sneak them into the playoffs. It's very difficult, you know, when you look at the landscape of this whole AFC, it's very difficult. I want to put them in the playoffs. Just because I love what I see about them, but ultimately it could mean that they miss out. Let me know though in the comments what you think of this Pittsburgh Steelers team going into this season. Are you very high on them based off the preseason, or do you think, you know, maybe another year? And in second place, this might surprise a few, I've got the Bengals. So that means I've got the Ravens winning this division, but we'll get to them. Specifically the Cincinnati Bengals. Why do I have them finishing second? I think there'll be a bit of regression. They've been the dominant team in this division for a couple of years. I don't think they'll necessarily fall off a cliff because under Burrow and with Jamar Chase as that number one receiver, T. Higgins is a quality. He's probably the best second receiver in the league. That offense is undeniably good. But I think, again, this is just a scenario of the other team being better. And, you know, again, I'll get to the Ravens in more depth later, but I just think the Ravens are set up for a big year. And so on the Bengals, I just think there's been a few changes to their personnel. On the line again, making changes. You know, they haven't really seemed to solidify a good offensive line. And one that's consistent across the board, from left tackle to right tackle and everything in between. And then flip it to the defense. They've lost their two main safeties in Von Bell and Jesse Bates III. That could be a big deal. They're a lot younger there in that position now. The addition of Nick Scott, you know, obviously a veteran sort of in this league. He's been in the league for a number of years. But then you've got Dax Hill, second-year safety, and Jordan Battle, a rookie safety. So there could be some growing pains, I think, in certain areas of this team that sort of hinder them from being that number one and being that dominant force that they have been in the last couple of years. But by all means, I could be completely wrong, and the undeniable talent of Joe Burrow just could blow the other parties away. But it would be a very interesting one to see. I love the Cincinnati Bengals regardless, and I really want to see them do well again. And in terms of my prediction for them, I'll have them sitting just one win above the Steelers with a 10-7 record. And so obviously comparing that to last season, a 12-win season, it's a bit of a drop-off. But I just think the team that we're about to speak about, the Baltimore Ravens, are going to be great. And so yes, as we already know, the Baltimore Ravens I've got finishing first. Winning this AFC North Division this season, it's a lot of reasons. And the first one is Lamar Jackson, I think, is going to have an MVP caliber type year. As long as he stays fit, that is the big caveat, I guess, to that. And the one thing that sort of baffles me about Lamar Jackson and the opinions around him, a lot of people just jump on the sort of bandwagon of that he can't throw. And I think with the number of weapons that he's now got, he's going to change that narrative. And while he is one of the best runners in this game, if not the best, and I think that's why a lot of people sort of think that he's not a great thrower because he is such a good runner of the ball at the quarterback position. I think he'll change that narrative. With the weapons, Odell Beckham Jr., there is question marks, of course, about him. He's not the player that he was 3-4 years ago. He's obviously had a couple of knee injuries now, so he's been out of the game last season. But that sort of experience and that X factor that he still would have, I think, can be a game changer. Zay Jones, the receiver that he picked up in the first round of the most recent draft, I think he could potentially be a Offensive Rookie of the Year type player. That's how good I think he could be. And then Rashad Bateman is sort of the forgotten man. Obviously, Mark Andrews as well, he's there. We don't really need to speak about him because he's just the guy. Rashad Bateman is sort of slept on, I think. And, for good reason. He hasn't really done a whole lot in the NFL to date. But he's got the characteristics and the profile to be a dominant player. He's a big receiver. And another one, like Jackson, as long as he stays fit, I think he can put together a decent year for the Ravens. And we've already talked about preseason games. The Baltimore Ravens lost their streak that was dating back years and years ago. In preseason, they'd won for like the last, 20-something games, which is ridiculous. They lost to the Washington Commanders, which that might be a blessing in disguise. Maybe that's what they needed. They were going into seasons too confident, winning every single game. Maybe that's what they needed, a loss in preseason to sort of give them a bit of a reality check. But regardless of all that, I think the Baltimore Ravens are sort of sneaky. Dark horse might not be the right word or term because they are still a big profile team and have been thereabouts for a number of years. But I think they're a very underrated option for a Super Bowl favourite. And then in terms of key players on this defense, Roquan Smith is the one that shines out to me because he's right in the middle. He's that veteran. He is a tackling machine. Obviously came over from Chicago during halfway through last season and just continued on the way he has been his whole career basically. And I think he can be a real pivotal point in this Ravens defense. Then they've got some real nice young pieces, I think, as well. In terms of the D-line off the edge, you've got Odafe Oweh, David Ojabo. David Ojabo missed a lot of his rookie season, and going into his draft, he was a first-round grade talent. Tore his Achilles, and that really dropped him. So we haven't seen a lot of him. And then Kyle Hamilton in his second year, I think, will be a good one to look at because it was a solid-ish first campaign, but I think he can make leaps and bounds in this next campaign. And so with that, what is the record that I have for the Ravens? I think it's going to go very, very nicely. I'm going to give them a 13-win season. I've talked their praises. I've talked about why. Lamar Jackson, a big reason for that, of course. MVP type season coming up for Lamar Jackson, back to his very best. And so that concludes my AFC North predictions. Let me know what you thought, whether I'm way off. Give me your thoughts on first, second, third, and dead last in this division. A very, very strong division, a very competitive division. And so if you did enjoy this video as well, let me know in the comments. Chuck us a like and consider subscribing. If you're new around here, I'm doing plenty of NFL content. All these shorts, all these videos, we're predicting every single record and every single division. It's all happening. NFL season is right around the corner. So come join this community and come join me in the comments below. I reply to everyone, so I love to have the discussion, and I love to hear what your thoughts are. So I'll see you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.